My Community Innovation Practitioner project was focused on heritage at risk, creative communities for sustainable, powerful places in South Wales. And what's the context for this research work? Well, it's the dramatic decrease in funding on culture that we've seen across Europe. And in this recent report from 2024, it picks out the two-tier Europe that's emerged in terms of cuts to funding, with some nations, particularly in the south, making cuts of between 30 and 35%. And the UK very definitely falls within that category of nations. We're seeing cuts, or have seen cuts rather, between 2010, 2011 through to last year, of between 30 to 32% in cultural services. And in Wales in particular, we've seen some of the most extreme reductions. And in fact, on top of funding of cuts of around 30 to 32% since 2013, we saw a really dramatic cut recently in December 2023. And these have put, and this is not my words, this is the words that you'll be able to pick up in the case study, these have put statutory heritage services at risk. So that's really where the project was positioned. How can we make heritage more sustainable? But more so, how can we involve communities in that process? Because involving communities is the answer. Key partners here were the Friends of Craig Gwladys Country Park, Neath Port Talbot, which owns the park in effect. Wonderful manager there called Lisa Kerman, who's been invaluable to everything that's gone on there. We've also worked with Neath Port Talbot Group of Colleges and Cardigan Bay Architectural Conservation. Now, I'm not going to say too much about this because you can pick up on this from the case study that's published on the Creative Communities website. And also I've done a blog on there called Putting the Making in Place Making. And there's a video here, a YouTube video on the Centre for Heritage Research Training at Swansea University, our YouTube site, where you'll get a feel for what that project involved. It was a community of practice, people coming together from the local area to see if we could renovate or at least stabilise the ruins of a late 19th century Victorian smithy. So do go and look at what we achieved. I'm really here just going to talk about some of the key findings. I think the major finding really was that traditional historic environment services are not delivering value as directly as they could. Historic environment services really are constituted to engage in the management, monitoring and maintenance, the 3 M's as I call them, of the historic environment. That's buildings, that's monuments, that's landscapes. It's about statutory protection. It's about guidance. So all of that's quite tight in how we deliver it. But of course, the way in which that's delivering amenity and public benefit is kind of intangible. And in some cases, there's the risk that actually by investing in all those things, we're neglecting communities and an animosity grows up between communities and those sites. So what we really need to do is to place communities in a co-created way more centrally in the delivery of heritage services. But of course, how we're going to do that is that we have to work, especially here in areas of deprivation that we have in parts of South Wales, but of course across the UK as well. We need to offer some kind of support services for how that happens. We need to offer scaffolding so that communities can begin to step forward and take stewardship of heritage assets so that they can be involved in those assets in wider placemaking strategies.
I think it's really important you've got community buy-in. The communities is what's going to help move that forward. You need their opinion, you need to understand, because it's all well and good, we're professionals saying this is what we should do and this is what we're going to do. But what's the point if that community doesn't care about it or it doesn't link to them or doesn't mean anything to them? You need to get them involved. So co-production, co-creation is the key to heritage now. We can't be having this hierarchical structure of us coming in, doing it to them. It needs to be the community telling us what to do, and flipping those kind of power structures, on their head. It's the community who's in charge and we're just the facilitators of that.
That was Esther Lewis, who works in heritage at Neath Port Talbot, and I was just really impressed with Esther. She's young, she's from the area, she's got a real sense of what heritage means to people there, and it was an absolute delight to interview her for the podcast. And the whole podcast experience, I think, was really, it was great because in some ways it unlocks that kind of emotive response to the idea of heritage. And I think that's what, sometimes surveys are a bit dry, and that's where the podcast was great, because we tapped into some of that emotion, and it really was illustrative of how passionate people feel about the past, about the heritage assets, and about the stories of their place. So what are the impacts and I think forward-looking developments? Some of those immediate impacts is that Swansea University, the Centre for Heritage Research and Training, has informed the heritage strategy, which has just been published by the local authority, and we're also sitting on the board responsible for the delivery of that strategy with a focus on skills and training. We are partnering in shared prosperity funded and National Lottery Heritage funded feasibility projects around heritage assets, which is exciting, so we can start to take some of these ideas forward. And we've had early stage conversations as well with CADU, which is the Historic Environment Services branch of Welsh Government, about collaborating on place making strategies at properties in care in areas of deprivation. So it's all a good start, if you like. But where I want to finish really is on the potential for impact, but also for kind of changes in policy. The origins of historic environment services can be seen here in this photograph. It's a photograph of the first inspectors of ancient monuments, or the so-called men from the ministry, at the investiture of Prince of Wales at Carnarvon Castle in 1911. And we still have inspectors of ancient monuments. And in so many ways, we're still in the thrall of conservation principles that were devised around this time. And I think that's where I'm going to leave this. Who is heritage really for? This is the question for Wales in a devolved policy context. We need to ask ourselves whether heritage here wishes, or we wish our heritage to be governed by a set of conservation principles devised to legitimise imperial and colonial ambitions for an aristocratic elite during an age of plenty, or do we want our heritage services to be indexed to innovative and future-looking legislation that has at its heart the well-being of future generations? And I refer, of course, to the Act, the 2015 Act, a very innovative piece of legislation and a great opportunity for heritage services here in South Wales. So check out the podcast, check out the case study, and thanks for listening.